oh, I wanted to help, but I missed it. Have I missed it completely? Should I reach out? What should I do? Most guys genuinely want to help.
And so I feel like a lot of us guys put up this, what I would call the invisible bat signal. Well, I put out this call for help. Nobody came, so therefore I can go back inside.
I make the joke quite often that women going off to the bathroom together. You know what, men, we need to start like doing something like that. I don't know what it looks like.
In a world where their dollar buys less, future is incredibly uncertain, those values of being, a protector, provider, owning a house, being a single income family and supporting your kids is ultimately unrealistic.
All right, my friend, welcome to the Don't Change Much podcast. If it is your first time here, my name is Mike Cameron, and I'm just a burnt out CEO trying to find a better way. Ran into a wall I couldn't outrun. I'm here with my co-host, Trevor Botkin. Trevor is a trades guy. Trevor, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm doing good, Mike. I'm also very burnt out. I just want to throw that in there. Super
Right?
burnt out trades guy.
Right? Burnt out trades guy, burnt out CEO.
Yeah.
We've been looking for a better way. And that's kind of the conversations that we're having on here, is to figure out what possibly could be that better way. So I'm pretty excited to hear from our guest today, because what I understand is he's been studying just a little bit maybe as to what that better way might be for dudes. Dr. Paul Sharp is our guest today. Paul is with the University of New South Wales. Did I get
That's
that right?
correct.
UNSW, and has studied under the mentorship of Dr. John Olaf, who, if you're in Canada, probably you might have heard of. His work is pretty well known at the University of British Columbia. Paul, welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah. I guess broadly, my interest is in men's health and everything that entails. But the lens that I come at it from is really one around kind of the social and structural influences, is how I would describe it. What are those influences in our lives that impact our health, that impact our identity as a man? How are those identities formed? And how does that allow us to show up in the world for ourselves and for those that are important to us?
As a burnt out, tradesman, I spent 3 decades coming up in the industry, and journey carpenters and other tradesmen sort of took over where my father left off and my mother left off, and I'm a guy that I attached, like, in a very unhealthy way, created my identity and attached more of it than is healthy to my experience in the trades and being a tradesperson.
That's unfortunately the pathway that a lot of guys end up in, starting to do some of this self-reflection and personal growth work. Is it stems from a traumatic experience. It stems from this disconnect between their own mental health and what the messages they're being told. And unfortunately, that's the case. It's, well, how do we get guys involved sooner, before a crisis occurs? And I think young guys, I think there's a lot of positives coming from younger generation and kind of that reformulation of what it means to be a man, because they're seeing the challenges that their forefathers are facing, and also the disconnect between their own realities in terms of the economy and the political context, and being able to uphold those traditional values. It doesn't necessarily fit anymore.
No.
Yeah, so at the time of recording, the Manosphere documentary is out right now, and that seems to be the big buzz. So I'm really curious to hear your take on how that impacts young men as they evolve and grow up in this world.
So, the Manosphere is an interesting piece that ultimately originated as kind of this fringe subculture. And left unchecked, it's ultimately grown. And I think that's maybe one of the things that wasn't captured in the documentary is, this isn't just some small group of men. This is something that everyone in that age range is being exposed to. So what it includes is content, message boards, influencers that are talking to men about things they're interested in. This could be fitness or financial success or relationships. But the underlying commonality here is an ideology. They're peddling a way of being a man based in almost hyper traditional values that um, encourage misogyny, male supremacy. They're about power, they're about status. Um, and the reality is that a lot of guys are getting exposed to this, right? So the Movember
Yeah.
report that looked at men's online digital health surveyed guys from Australia, UK, US. Unfortunately, no Canadian guys in there. But what they found was that nearly two-thirds of young men are routinely exposed to and engaging with this content. There's the funny thing is there's actually a lot we can learn from the Manosphere and what they're doing because they're ultimately serving a need. Men are looking
Yeah.
for something and they're finding it in these spaces. Um, so ultimately, what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for connection. They're looking for a sense of belonging. And they're often looking for help around developing an identity. They're looking for help around the struggles they're dealing with as a young man in today's society. And they're not finding that elsewhere. So, really, it is that connection. It is that space that is so important. And that's what we need to be focusing on is where can we build these spaces that are safe, that men feel comfortable in, that they can open up and disclose a bit more.
It takes me back to when I came into the construction sector as a young man. Um, I was looking for a place to belong. I came up not feeling like I belonged too many places. I felt like, I didn't do well in school. I didn't have a lot of places. There was a bit of insecurity around that, right? Like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I come into this industry that just embraced me. I mean, I had to work my ass off, to be honest, but but in there, I was also still looking for, the knowledge I needed about, how to be a man, how to show up in the world. And that industry largely taught me for many years. I remember distinctly just the other side of that is I lost my father when I was 25 years old. I thought I had all my shit together and then I lost my dad and I immediately felt very exposed. I was like, I have not learned everything I need to know from this guy.
Mm.
And then the industry takes over. So, I'm hearing that like, we all know that scientifically, we're all craving certainty. We kind of want certainty. And I always say like, if I'm looking for certainty on how to conduct myself as a young person or even an old person like me in this world, I'm looking around me and I'm trying to gather that knowledge and I'm going to go to the voice that sounds the most confident, right? And these guys in their platforms, they sound very confident when they speak their truth. Um, but it's not. I mean, if you listen and you dissect it, I think we had this conversation earlier where it's it doesn't take much. And I think Louis Theroux showed that in the documentary. It doesn't take any effort at all to poke holes in it. But it does feel like a jumping off of like my generation, early internet days. I hate to say it. Uh, there was this huge culture around how to pick up women and it's so similar. It's so similar to what I'm hearing today, these ideas of how to like, impose your will and like win them over and not take any shit from people. Um, and it's just interesting. Like this, I think this movement's been around forever and the internet is just amplifying so much. Like anybody, I mean, look at us. We got a podcast. Come on. Anybody, anybody could have a platform.
It's so true. These ideas aren't necessarily new, but the process of kind of indoctrinating men into them has changed, right? So, you know, y- I think it's easy to vilify some of these guys, but you need to kind of take a step back and look at where they came from. And as you say, Louis does a nice job of kind of pointing out these entry points that, they're going in with quite genuine interests around, we talked about identity, but around, finding a partner and, these measures of success in society. And what then gets built in is this escalation, and because that's part of the business model where
Mm.
they build in and layer on shame and insecurity and mistrust of systems and structures, and that creates this polarization of us against them. And now once you're in that state, you've got them, right? And it's
Mm.
rewarded online to be provocative, right? You get more views, you get
Right.
more clicks. And what was unfortunately completely missed is the role of the algorithms in this process. Is once you watch
Yeah.
one of these things all
Well,
the way
yeah.
through, now you're just fed it more and more and more. And that's where this kind of extremism in my mind stems from.
Yeah, and you're so bang on about the algorithm because it becomes this echo chamber that feeds itself, and it's so hard to get out of that. So do you have strategies for guys to sort of pull back, pull out of some of
Yeah,
that?
look, it's tough. And, that's part of the problem, right? Is if you're not critically challenging or you don't have that counter narrative in your life, then this is the only message that you're seeing. And so I think that, we can talk about that at kind of different levels of like what can the individual do, but also kind of what are our responsibilities more broadly. And I think what we're really lacking is this progressive counter narrative, right? There's not really a clear message. We're saying, yeah, this is bad, but we're not telling them, well, here's what you should do instead. And that's what we need to start
Totally.
developing more.
Strongly agree with that. I've heard it said many times before that the negative is 10 times louder than the positive. Right now, it's a time to start standing up for voices, to start standing up and making some noise and saying, stop, just fucking stop
Yeah.
and pay attention. If you want people to love you, you got to love them. If you want to be loved and attract a good person into your life, you need to be safe. You need to hold space for all of their personality. And I think we talk about like the idea of toxic masculinity, and I think that's pushing some guys away too because it's suggesting that masculinity itself um, is toxic. And I want listeners to know that there's nothing wrong with masculinity. It's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. The world needs it. But my argument is if you're just going to be strong, you're just going to be violent, and you're going to be judgmental and not listen, in the absence of compassion, restraint, empathy, and the ability to hold space for people, all that strength just makes you a monster. That's not manhood. That's not masculinity. That's just being a monster. And so I just really want to say that, like, I hope guys listening to this don't feel attacked. And if you do, I understand. There just might be that sensitivity might be because there's work to do. But if you, I find that when I show up with all those hard things like compassion, empathy, the things that require real effort in the world, I feel more fulfilled and I get a better response from the world around me that I feel more valuable. I feel more valued.
As you pointed out, Trevor, when things happen in your life, when you have some struggles, that's when things start to unravel a little bit of like, well, I can't maintain this identity and therefore I've failed, right? This is kind of that issue that we've kind of been grappling with for the longest time. So, first one is what are the problems? The second one are, well, what are the benefits to be gained from promoting, a more equal, inclusive society? And, there are measurable benefits to doing this. At a grand scale around kind of that happiness report that just came out recently, more
Right.
equitable societies are generally happier. In societies, not to say that this is a big driver of that happiness, the change in the report, but societies where there's greater sense of precarious manhood, so meaning you need to staunchly defend your identity and prove it constantly. Um, there's generally lower social levels of happiness, right? So we can quantifiably
Mm.
say there is benefit to being more inclusive and progressive. And, to your point, Trevor, it's not about getting rid of masculinities. It's about how we frame it. So there's strength in being a champion for those who don't have the voice. There's
Yes.
strength in being a leader, in driving these ideals forward.
So for somebody that wants to be a leader in this kind of space, what what specific recommendations do you have?
Yeah. So ultimately, what we need to do, because the way that the Manosphere content is set up is it's black and white, right? It's this or it's that. And the challenge is that's not how the world works. We often sit
Yeah.
in the gray. And so talking to guys about uncertainty being a normal part of life, especially at that age, especially as you're trying to figure out who you are in this world, and how you want to show up. It is uncomfortable, right? And that's ultimately what the guys say who are wrapped up in that content is it provides them with optimism for the future that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
now's not the time to step back. In fact, we need to be leaning into it more than ever, because those values are showing up in their real life, right? They're taking them off the internet and then they're acting on them in their real life. There was some interesting work done, again, done over here in Australia by Steve Roberts at the end of last year. And he interviewed teachers that worked with young guys in high school and I think early university years. Um, and they reported this stark increase in these behaviors, in these misogynistic views, in the kind of homosocial harassment, in this kind of humor as bait kind of narratives, right? These kind of typical tricks of the trade that a lot of these online guys are using, sexualization of women, right? Like there's a lot of problematic ideas. And if they're left unchecked, it's only going to continue, and it has
Yeah.
real harm to all those around, as well as those young guys and their
Yeah.
future prospects and everything.
So Paul, what does the research tell us about either creating spaces for men to connect or environments that will allow men to better connect? I believe have you done some work with men's sheds?
Uh, Adjacently, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, again, one of the things I love about that concept, and I do this in corporate, is sort of the health by stealth. When I go into corporate, I have to talk about employee engagement, all the things that disconnection, how it impacts their bottom line. Not even so much from a societal standpoint, but there is legitimately some return on investment for organizations to promote better connection. So what does the research tell you around
yeah.
that?
Well, we did some really interesting work on this recently, and we're just in the process of publishing some of it. So this was a study with Canadian men, and we actually asked guys to go out and take a bunch of photos around what social connection meant to them. What were some of the spaces that they caught up in? What were some of their strategies for connecting? And there's this belief that men are kind of passive in the world often. They're just kind of floating through it and things happen to them. But the guys in our study were really adamant about wanting stronger, more authentic connections with their buddies. That came out so clearly. Obviously, there was lots of challenges around doing that, around, do I have the language and do I have the license to, say these things or ask these things without it coming across poorly or, not being received the way I want it to. Um, but, to your point around the men's shed is one of the most prominent strategies that guys used was kind of this, we've heard about the shoulder to shoulder forever, right?
Yeah.
Um, where they do an activity together and that facilitates the conversation. So the guys, it was challenging to ring up your buddy and say, hey, I'm having a really tough time. Can we have a chat? And buddy's like, what? No, why? To be honest, lots of them probably would say that, but they would help, but they were a bit more uh, hesitant to explicitly ask for help. It was more implicit. Sometimes the message got lost. Um, But what did resonate well with them is saying, "Hey, can we, catch up, go for a coffee? Can we go for a walk? Can we go on a boys' trip?" Something like that. And it was those environments when these conversations happened. Um, People let their guard down. There was an aspect of psychological safety, and it actually resonates a lot with this masculine identity of, there's reciprocity there. Is instead of me being the one helping you, as in you need it and I have the answer, there's a bit more figuring it out together, right? There's a back and forth of,
Mm.
maybe I can share some of my experiences and you can feed off that, right? So there's less indebtedness to having that kind of peer support conversations. Um,
And that's what we talk about in the classical peer support sense, is lowering that sense of hierarchy, like one person's helping the other. Peer support is by definition mutual aid. It is two people helping each other by talking through the stuff, asking good questions, listening for the answers. And it's a powerful, powerful tool for
Yeah.
cutting through all the bullshit and the anxiety and the barriers between connection. I'm glad to hear that brought up today.
Yeah, and you're right, it's so powerful, and I see that in our connected men's groups because I always tell the guy, like, "This isn't Mike-led, this is peer-led," and so we take turns, leading the thing, and I've had many guys talk about that have done group therapy where they've felt like they're experiments in a fishbowl, whereas, in the peer group, it's like, I'm just listening to your struggles, you're listening to mine, and like, "Oh, shit, I'm not alone." One of the things I'd love to hear a little bit more on that you touched on, because I'm actually just writing an article that's tentatively titled "The Invisible Bat Signal," because we talked about this with our guys, because one of the guys had sent up what I would call the invisible bat signal. So he had made some reference to maybe needing some connection, and then was resentful when it wasn't picked up. And we talked about that, and so when I asked him, "Well, did you explicitly say, like, 'Hey, man, I need help right now?'" He says, "Well, I reached out and I asked him if he could get together for a coffee." Okay, but, if I'm busy and can't get together for a coffee, it's different than, "Hey, Mike, I need some help. Can you make some time available?" And so I feel like a lot of us guys put up this, what I would call the invisible bat signal. Well, I put out this call for help. Nobody came. So therefore I can go back inside.
there's a bit of navigating that goes on around, navigating the stigma, navigating the relational aspect of asking for help without explicitly doing it. Um, so some of the guys, they did explicitly ask for help and it wasn't received well, right? And, that's an immediate signal for them to go back into that shell and be like, well, that was a bad idea. I'm not going to try that again, right? So, there is an aspect of needing to be persistent because it's not necessarily that the person didn't want to help. Maybe they needed a minute to get their head around it, and we talked to guys on both sides. Some guys identified the need for help and another guy was reaching out, that they were putting up that invisible signal, but they missed the cues. And then they talked about that, that uncomfortable situation afterwards where they're like, "Oh, I wanted to help, but I missed it. Have I missed it completely? Should I reach out? What should I do?" Right? So, it is relational. There's an aspect to both sides of the conversation. Um, and I mean, the main message is most guys genuinely want to help. But we're so
Yeah.
hardwired to, when there's an issue, like let's say you've broken up with your partner or you have a health issue, the first thing we often think of is practical help. Like, I'll drive you to your appointment or I'll help you move. And in their mind, yeah, I'm helping. I'm here for you, right? And if you wanted to say something, you would, but we don't. Um, and so, it's bridging that gap between the practical help with the emotional support that is often needed in those situations as well.
Yeah, let's maybe this is a good point just to say, like, if you're listening to this, one of the what I have found and learned in my own life, because I have a massive hero complex and I want to fix everything for everyone. But I found when somebody comes to me and confides in me, um, or wants to unload a bit, quite often the best way I can serve them is to listen, and to listen to what they're going through and acknowledge it. They're not looking for me to solve it. And if you're confused or you're worried about how to react, you can actually just ask, "Hey, thank you for sharing this with me. Are you looking for suggestions? Do you want me to just listen? You just trying to get things off your chest? Like, how can I serve you well?" And that kind of just humility and transparency has started to really um, affect the way I serve other people. And you know what? I look at my own experience, and that's what I'm looking for other people when I download what I'm going through. Is I just need somebody to listen and acknowledge. I'm not necessarily looking for somebody to fix my problems.
And these, the real interactions are uncomfortable. And we often see online, right? We see these curated, clipped pieces where there's no pauses, there's no discomfort, because those are the ones that get cut and not included, right? So sit in that awkwardness. It's okay that it's a bit uncomfortable. Real interactions aren't always perfect.
Yeah. And I love Trevor, as you said, one of the things that for those that are close to me, we've got some common language around that. And that's, I use the term empathy or strategy. And my partner and I use that all the time now. So if I come to her with a problem, she'll very quickly just say empathy or strategy. And then I can take a beat because sometimes when I come, I don't even know what I need in that moment. So it allows me to just pause and reflect and say, oh, you know what? I just need a little empathy right now. I just need you to listen. And that power, I think that's the other piece of the peer support stuff is the power of just being witnessed is immense. And we underestimate that.
Yeah. It's a tall order for a lot of guys too. And I think it's important to acknowledge that because we often, if I'm going to ask for help, I want to know what I'm asking help for or what I need, right? If I don't understand the problem, how can I ask for help? Whereas I think women are more likely to kind of congregate around a problem and help figure it out together. Like, here's how I'm feeling. Where's that coming from? Versus, here's what
You
I
know
need
what?
exactly.
I make the joke quite often that like we men like I've been heard to make fun of women going off to the bathroom together. Um, but you know what, men, we need to start like doing something like that. I don't know what it looks like, what the male version of it looks like, but women are going off to the bathroom to have those conversations and to download and to figure this shit out together. They're doing it right, and so maybe I shouldn't poke fun at it all the time, but if maybe men, we need to like, I don't know, start going to the woodshed, whatever.
No, I mean, to tie it all together around this idea of the manosphere and the online content, um, it is a beast, and it's not something that we're going to solve overnight. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's a great um, first step. The documentary in terms of mainstreaming these ideas, and because if you're not in that demographic, you're probably not being fed this content, so you don't necessarily know what's going on. Um, to me, it always comes back to that human connection, human interaction, and just being purposeful with how we're showing up in our lives and how we're showing up for each other. Um, because identity is ultimately relational. It's negotiated through bouncing ideas off other guys, hearing how things are going for them. So if we just go through passively, that's how you fall into these quote unquote traps of these ideologies. Um, we need to be kind of critically discussing them instead of hiding from them. And that's really going to be our best way forward in my mind.
Wonderful. Any resources that you'd like to highlight?
Interesting one. I mean, by all means, check out the work that we're doing around In Good Company and some of the men's experiences, because I think that's a great value. And we have the In Good Company podcast where we talked about a lot of the experiences of these guys and brought professionals in to unpack a little bit more around masculine identity and the psychological distress that can be connected with that from a research perspective. So there's an aspect of education and information there. Um, but maybe this is part of the problem is I don't have an immediate answer to that counter narrative. Besides the Don't Change Much podcast, of course. Keep listening to the voices that are out there that are helping to shape those reimaginings of masculine identity.
And don't forget to hit like and subscribe and do all those things. That was
All that.
perfect, Paul. That was perfect. You saved me from having to do that. Trevor,
Nice.
any last words as we wrap up here, brother?
No, I really appreciate your commentary and the research you're doing, and the details and the facts and the perspective you bring to the table. I think, like you, have been quite concerned at what I'm seeing in the internet, because we can do better, and we've got it in us to do it.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate the work you're doing as well.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.